A Prisoner in the Caucasus by Leo Tolstoy, Part 5. Zilhin crept into the hole, widened it so that Kostilin might also get through, and then they both sat waiting till all should be quiet in the aeol. As soon as all was quiet, Zilhin crept under the wall, got out, and whispered to Kostilin, "Come!" Kostilin crept out, but in so doing he caught a stone with his foot and made a noise. The master had a very vicious watchdog, a spotted one called Olyeshkin. Zilhin had been careful to feed him for some time before. Olyeshkin heard the noise and began to bark and jump, and the other dogs did the same. Zilhin gave a slight whistle and threw him a bit of cheese. Olyeshkin knew Zilhin, wagged his tail, and stopped barking. But the master had heard the dog, and shouted to him from his hut, "Heit, heit, Olyeshkin!" Zilhin, however, scratched Olyeshkin behind the ears, and the dog was quiet, and rubbed against his legs, wagging his tail. They sat hidden behind a corner for a while. All became silent again. Only a sheep coughed inside a shed, and the water rippled over the stones in the hollow. It was dark. The stars were high overhead, and the new moon showed red as it set, horns upward, behind the hill. In the valleys the fog was white as milk. Zilhin rose and said to his companion, "Well, friend, come along." They started, but they had only gone a few steps when they heard the mullah crying from the roof, "Allah Bishmillah, Ir-Rahman." That meant that the people would be going to the mosque. So they sat down again, hiding behind a wall, and waited a long time till the people had passed. At last all was quiet again. "Now then, may God be with us." They crossed themselves and started once more. They passed through a yard and went down the hillside to the river, crossed the river, and went along the valley. The mist was thick, but only near the ground. Overhead the stars shone quite brightly. Zilhin directed their course by the stars. It was cool in the mist, and easy walking. Only their boots were uncomfortable, being worn out and trodden down. Zilhin took his off, threw them away, and went barefoot, jumping from stone to stone, and guiding his course by the stars. Kostilin began to lag behind. "Walk slower," he said. "These confounded boots have quite blistered my feet." "Take them off," said Zilhin. "It will be easier walking without them." Kostilin went barefoot, but got on still worse. The stones cut his feet, and he kept lagging behind. Zilhin said, "If your feet get cut, they'll heal again, but if the Tartars catch us and kill us, it will be worse." Kostilin did not reply, but went on, groaning all the time. Their way led through the valley for a long time. Then, to the right, they heard dogs barking. Zilhin stopped, looked about, and began climbing the hill, feeling with his hands. "Ah," said he, "we have gone wrong, and have come too far to the right. Here is another aeol, one I saw from the hill. We must turn back and go up that hill to the left. There must be a wood there." But Kostilin said, "Wait a minute. Let me get breath. My feet are all cut and bleeding." "Never mind, friend. They'll heal again. You should spring more lightly like this." And Zilhin ran back and turned to the left up the hill towards the wood. Kostilin still dragged behind and groaned. Zilhin only said, "Hush!" and went on and on. They went up the hill and found a wood, as Zilhin had said. They entered the wood and forced their way through the brambles, which tore their clothes. At last they came to a path and followed it. "Stop!" They heard the tramp of hooves on the path, and waited, listening. It sounded like the tramping of a horse's feet, but then ceased. They moved on, and again they heard the tramping. When they paused, it also stopped. Zilhin crept nearer to it, and saw something standing on the path, where it was not quite so dark. It looked like a horse, and yet not quite like one, and on it was something queer, not like a man. He heard it snorting. "What can it be?" Zilhin gave a low whistle, and off it dashed from the path into the thicket. and the woods were filled with the noise of crackling, as if a hurricane were sweeping through, breaking the branches. Kostelin was so frightened that he sank to the ground, but Zilin laughed and said, "It's a stag. Don't you hear him breaking the branches with his antlers? We were afraid of him, and he is afraid of us." They went on. The great bear was already setting. It was near morning, and they did not know whether they were going the right way or not. Zilin thought it was the way he had been brought by the Tartars, and that they were still some 7 miles from the Russian fort, but he had nothing certain to go by, and at night one easily mistakes the way. After a time they came to a clearing. Kostelin sat down and said, "Do as you like. I can go no further. My feet won't carry me." Zilin tried to persuade him. "No, I shall never get there. I can't." Zilin grew angry, and spoke roughly to him. "Well, then, I shall go on alone. Goodbye." Kostelin jumped up and down and followed. They went another 3 miles. The mist in the wood had settled down still more densely. They could not see a yard before them, and the stars had grown dim. Suddenly they heard the sound of a horse's hoofs in front of them. They heard its shoes strike the stones. Zilin lay down flat, and listened with his ear to the ground. "Yes, so it is. A horseman is coming towards us." They ran off the path, crouched among the bushes, and waited. Zilin crept to the road, looked, and saw a Tartar on horseback driving a cow and humming to himself. The Tartar rode past. Zilin returned to Kostelin. "God has let him past us. Get up and let's go on." Kostelin tried to rise, but fell back again. "I can't. On my word, I can't. I have no strength left." He was heavy and stout, and had been perspiring freely. Chilled by the mist and with his feet all bleeding, he had grown quite limp. Zilin tried to lift him, when suddenly Kostelin screamed out, "Oh, how it hurts!" Zilin's heart sank. "What are you shouting for? The Tartar is still near. He'll have heard you." And he thought to himself, "He is really quite done up. What am I to do with him? It won't do to desert a comrade." "Well, then, get up and climb on my back. I'll carry you if you really can't walk." He helped Kostelin up and put his arm under his thighs. Then he went on to the path carrying him. "Only for the love of heaven," said Zilin, "don't throttle me with your hands. Hold on to my shoulders." Zilin found his load heavy. His feet too were bleeding, and he was tired. Now and then he stooped to balance Kostelin better, jerking him up so that he should sit higher, and then went on again. The Tartar must, however, really have heard Kostelin scream. Zilin suddenly heard someone galloping behind and shouting in the Tartar tongue. He darted in among the bushes. The Tartar seized his gun and fired, but did not hit them, shouting in his own language, and galloped off along the road. "Well, now we are lost, friend," said Zilin. "That dog will gather the Tartars together to hunt us down. Unless we can get a couple of miles away from here, we are lost." And he thought to himself, "Why the devil did I saddle myself with this block? I should have got away long ago, had I been alone." "Go on alone," said Kostelin. "Why should you perish because of me?" "No, I won't go. It won't do to desert a comrade." Again he took Kostelin on his shoulders and staggered on. They went on in that way for another half-mile or more. They were still in the forest and could not see the end of it, but the mist was already dispersing, and clouds seemed to be gathering. The stars were no longer to be seen. Zilin was quite done up. They came to a spring walled in with stones by the side of the path. Zilin stopped and set Kostelin down. "Let me have a rest and drink," he said, "and let us eat some of the cheese. It can't be much further now." But hardly had he lain down to get a drink, when he heard the sound of horses' feet behind him. Again they darted to the right among the bushes and lay down under a steep slope. They heard Tartar voices. The Tartars stopped at the very spot where they had turned off the path. The Tartars talked a bit, and then seemed to be setting a dog on the scent. There was a sound of crackling twigs, and a strange dog appeared from behind the bushes. It stopped and began to bark. Then the Tartars, also strangers, came climbing down, seized Zilin and Kosilin, bound them, put them on horses, and rode away with them. When they had ridden about 2 miles, they met Abdul, their owner, with 2 other Tartars following him. After talking with the strangers, he put Zilin and Kosilin on 2 of his own horses and took them back to the Aeol. Abdul did not laugh now, and did not say a word to them. They were back at the Aeol by daybreak, and were set down in the street. The children came crowding round, throwing stones and shrieking, and beating them with whips. The Tartars gathered together in a circle, and the old man from the foot of the hill was also there. They began discussing, and Zilin heard them considering what should be done with him and Kosilin. Some said they ought to be sent farther into the mountains, but the old man said, "They must be killed." Abdul disputed with him, saying, "I gave money for them, and I must get ransom for them." But the old man said, "They will pay you nothing, but will only bring misfortune. It is a sin to feed Russians. Kill them, and have done with it." They dispersed. When they had gone, the master came up to Zilin and said, "If the money for your ransom is not sent within a fortnight, I will flog you. And if you try to run away again, I'll kill you like a dog. Write a letter, and write it properly." Paper was brought to them, and they wrote the letters. Shackles were put on their feet, and they were taken behind the mosque to a deep pit about 12 feet square, into which they were let down. That was the end of part 5. Good night, everybody.